Have you ever seen anything as beautiful as this roasted fresh ham hock, glazed carrots, Hawaiian rolls, turnip greens, and baked macaroni and cheese, y'all? So golden and cheesy, sitting up like cake, and we make this without a roux. So let's get to cooking. The ingredients we will be using include red hoop cheddar cheese, also sharp cheddar, evaporated milk in the can, elbow macaroni, 2 bags of carrots, and a bag of turnip greens, a 1-pound bag, as well as some King's Hawaiian sweet rolls. And of course, the star of the dish are these very meaty ham hocks. These are fresh ham hocks, so not smoked meat. So you'll notice the skin is different and the meat is much more fleshy. The seasonings we're going to use include our standard seasonings that we use when we're cooking our soul food meats. So we're going to start out with washing our meat. We're going to use water and white vinegar, of course. Look at how big and meaty these ham hocks are. This is pork, of course. So they look pretty clean already. I'm just going to let them sit in the water for a few moments while I prep the remainder of my vegetables. Of course, I'm going to wash my hands after touching the meat before I clean my carrots. So the carrots have been washed in vinegar and water as well. And then I dry them off mostly, and I'm adding them to the base of my pan. And now I'm going to prep my celery. So I'm just cutting off the end pieces that I'm not going to eat. And then as you see me do with celery all the time, I break each stalk in half to pull off the fibrous parts, strands, so that people don't have to chew on those little pieces when they eat this dish. And then after I pull all the strands off, I just chop my celery into smallish size pieces, remembering that as these vegetables cook, bake in the oven, they will release their moisture and shrink down a little bit. Next up, I'm cutting my onion, 1 yellow onion. So I cut both ends off and I'm discarding those pieces. And then I'm just going to cut it in half, peel it, and then give it a coarse chop. So I'm just cutting it in half and then in big chunks, not really slices. And now I'm just mixing my onions with the other vegetables in my pan. And so now we're going to season up everything. We're using poultry seasoning, black pepper, onion powder, complete seasoning, sea salt, garlic powder, paprika. So you just want to add each one. You could start off with half a teaspoon of everything first, and then add more of the things that you like. So mainly salt and pepper, start off with a small amount, and then the other seasonings you can add to your personal taste. For me, I probably use about a tablespoon of each seasoning other than the salt and pepper. And so I'm just mixing that up with a gloved hand. And now I'm adding the meat. So I'm nestling my meat around the vegetables. And you can already see with the pan I'm using that it's too much. As this cooks, it's going to release juices and I don't want it to overflow in my oven. So I'm trying my best to nestle the vegetables in and around the meat. But ultimately, I'm just going to go ahead and get a bigger pan to cook this all in. Before I do that though, I'm going to go ahead and season up my meat with the same seasonings that I use for my vegetables. And this is the bigger pan that I stick everything in before I pop it in the oven. We're going to bake this at 350 degrees for about 3 hours, and you can check it every hour and see if you need to turn it. So while that's in the oven, I'm going to prep my greens. The first part, I have some smoked turkey wings that I'm going to rinse off in water before I boil it. And the turnip greens that I showed you are turnip greens in the bag, but I do still wash my bagged greens. Look at how vibrant the color is of these greens. So I just rinse them off in a colander first. And then I'm going to place it in a bowl with cold water and white vinegar and let it soak for a few moments, and then lift it up out of the water and put it into another bowl, and look at what's left over. So the greens were technically cleaned beforehand, but there's still some debris, some bits at the bottom of the bowl that I may not want in my cooked dish. So that's why I wash my greens even when they say they've been pre-washed. And then I have my turkey wings. So the first step is to fill up a pot with water Now you don't need a lot of water because greens will cook their own, but the first step we're going to do is to actually boil our meat. So this meat is smoked. I do like to let it boil for a good 30 minutes or so before I add my greens to help extract that flavor and make a broth with the plain water. So now I'm adding some greens that I had frozen. I had some collards in a baggie that I mixed in. So I let that cook for a few moments, and you can see how those greens got darker as they cooked. And so now I'm adding in my fresh turnip greens. I like the contrast, slight contrast in texture and flavor between mixing greens. So sometimes I mix collards, turnip greens, and mustard greens if I happen to have them. So the seasonings we're going to use are sea salt, cayenne pepper, complete seasoning, garlic powder, onion powder, and you don't need the black pepper if you're going to use cayenne. You can use one or the other. The poultry seasoning has thyme, sage, marjoram, rosemary, and a few other spices, but it is a vegan spice. I do like to add that into my greens as well, just because I like the flavor. But if you don't care for it, then you don't have to add it. You'll notice as I'm mixing up my greens, you can see the darker greens, the collards have been cooking, and the mustard greens are brighter. When this all cooks down, it will be a more uniform color to the greens. So I put the top back on it, and now I'm ready to prep my macaroni and cheese. So once the water comes to a boil, then I add my salt, and then I add my hard macaroni noodles, and I cook it per the instructions on the box. Once that is complete, I turn on the cool water in my sink so that I can drain the hot water out. In the colander, I add some seasonings to my noodles, like ground mustard, black pepper, onion powder, because I like for my noodles to be seasoned, not just the custard that is around the macaroni and cheese. I also add 1 tablespoon of butter just to mix around the hot noodles. So in prepping my 13 by 9 pan, you can use 1 tablespoon, even though I have 2 here, just to grease the bottom of the pan. Now this red hoop cheddar cheese I bought from Costco, and this is 1.84 pounds, and I paid $4.19 per pound. So I'm going to grate up this cheese. I used about 16 ounces of dry elbow noodles, so I'm going to use about 32 ounces or double the amount of noodles of cheese. So just around 2 pounds of cheese. So I'm going to use most of the cheese, and then at the end I'll decide if I want to use all of it to make it extra cheesy or not. Now you'll notice as I'm grating, when I get to a piece that's soft or small, I'll break it into chunks instead of risk hurting myself or grating my fingers. So you may want to do that as well. So with all of this grated cheese, I'm adding about half of it now, and then I'm going to mix that in. My noodles are still hot, so I am using a silicone utensil to do that. Now I mixed in the red hoop cheddar, so now I'm adding some sharp to go on top. I do like the flavor contrast of using multiple cheeses, but if there's one cheese in particular that you like, then you can use that. I do have a glove on to protect my hands a little bit since the cheese is still quite warm. So now that I have a good amount of cheese mixed in, I'm going to add my milk. In this recipe, I'm using 2 12-ounce cans of evaporated milk. Because this is evaporated milk, it's extra creamy, so I like the flavor and the consistency of it. So I'm using 2 cans of evaporated milk. This is not condensed milk. Sweetened condensed milk is sweet that I would use for desserts. This is just plain evaporated milk. Once I add my 2 cans, you'll notice that it's still not enough in the pan, so I also added some whole milk. I put it into a measuring cup so that you can get a good idea of how much. I put 2 cups in this mixing cup, and now I'm just going to move it around. It looks like a lot of milk, I know, but I like the custardy part of macaroni and cheese, and the milk is going to be absorbed into the inside of these elbow noodles, and it's going to mix with the cheese as it bakes, and so it's going to make like a creamy, delicious texture in and around our noodles. So you'll notice at the beginning I said this was a simple mac and cheese because we didn't make a separate roux or cream sauce on the stove, which that's absolutely delicious as well, but I like making it this way sometimes when I have less time. And so then I added more cheese on top because I don't want much of the noodles on top to be exposed. I want everything to be covered with cheese. And then I added smoked paprika. Because this is smoked, it does add some flavor, but it also imparts a beautiful color as this cooks. So I'm starting off with a piece of foil that I spray with my olive oil spray to put on top, just to make sure the cheese on top doesn't melt onto my aluminum foil. So halfway through, I let the macaroni cook with the foil on, and then I take it off. To your greens, you can take out the meat after about an hour so it doesn't overcook. And then I do like to add a little bit of butter. You can also try olive oil instead. All in all, I cook my macaroni and cheese at 350 degrees for 45 minutes to an hour. It depends on the oven I'm using. It also depends on the size of the pan. So after about 30 minutes, you can take your foil off and give it a look. If there are any parts that are extra dark, you may need to turn your pan of macaroni and cheese as well. After 3 hours, look at my beautiful ham hocks, y'all. You want to test with a fork to see if it's fork tender. That's when you know it's really done. You also want to pierce your carrots to make sure they are done as well. So if you like your meat more tender, then you can pop it in the oven and cook it a little bit longer. But all in all, y'all, within 3 hours, I have this beautiful dinner of baked macaroni and cheese that is golden on top. I have cooked greens. I put some of my pieces of meat back into my greens. And then I have these beautiful ham hocks that I sprinkle with parsley for a bit of fresh color. You could also chop up some scallions to put on it instead, green onions. That would be delicious. So yeah, this is a yummy Sunday dinner that looks very impressive, but it doesn't take a whole lot of work, y'all. And look at how tender this meat is, y'all. If you like pork, then you will enjoy this dish. And let me just show you cutting into this macaroni and cheese. So this doesn't have a cream sauce. It sits up like a slice of cake. Now, to me, this macaroni and cheese is even better the second day. So leftovers are definitely a must. And that's why I cook so much, because I do like to be able to eat a meal for a couple of days. So thank you so much for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel and check out my playlist with other soul food recipes.